Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a panel that, while it may not be gender diverse, I think you'll find very shortly that it's quite diverse in the areas of expertise, and we bring a range of different perspectives to understand the interplay between technology, innovation on the scientific and engineering side, the political side, and the cultural aspects. And as we look at the agenda before us in terms of making the sustainability transition, we now know very clearly that this 1.5 degree mandate, as you've heard in the prior panels, is not a soft target. It's one that we absolutely must hit, but it's one that we are woefully behind. Vanishingly few countries are at that target today. Morocco and a very few others currently have plans in place that would get them to this decarbonization goal we need, and that all of the countries, regrettably except for my own, have committed to solidly under the Paris Accords. We now have under a year to arrive at COP26 in Scotland with not just PowerPoint, but real power on the technical side, the business side, the social innovation side, to make the climate story one that we don't spend the rest of our lives apologizing to our children and grandchildren. And that's a mandate that we have not seen before, but there are significant rays of hope. We'll talk in the panel about opportunities to electrify transportation, to invest in a circular economy, to deal with the issues of ocean plastics, to deal with the huge issue beyond climate change of inequality, the rising ideas of the Green Deal in Europe, and I guess because we in the New World are newer, we call essentially the same thing the Green New Deal. But all of these are pieces of an equation that no single discipline is going to be the winner on. It won't be a technology story. For those of you who heard Bill Gross in the Idealab presentation earlier today, we're not going to have a single technology that saves us, not a single policy, not a single effort on the legal or business side, but we're going to have to see a much different integration of these things, all pulling together in a way that we really haven't seen. So my hope, personally, as a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, where we work in not only ideas, but also in training of the next generation, is that we hear from the panelists now a number of approaches to how we can build those individual pillars of this very different green economy. So I'll start by going to the minister to my left, to start to get a feel for what's taking place, and we'll essentially go down the list and open up with a number of the features around this debate, this partnership between technology and policy. Then we'll move into some more specific questions around individual initiatives. So again, I welcome you all here, and Minister, let me ask you to start.
Well, thank you very much. It is my great honor and pleasure to be here with you today. First of all, I fully agree that there is no dilemma about the relationship between policy and technology. It's also a false dilemma. We all understand and we need both. We need not just cooperation. We know that both fields are very, very strongly interdependent, and each policy has to take into account new technologies, also emerging technologies, even those who have not emerged yet. We have to be a little bit more ambitious sometimes than the reality provides for us. So I think that policymakers have to be very ambitious when we come to climate change, environmental goals, and of course our future is the same, sustainability. So my deep conviction is that each government today, each policymaker has to be oriented above all towards education. We have to educate ourselves every day more and more about all these new technologies, about climate change and such things, but especially young people from the kindergartens, elementary schools, and so on and so forth. They have to be educated about these new coming things, about the changes, and about the about our values, because we have to redefine some of our values. This is very important things. And I can tell you that in Slovenia, we have just started the project where we will teach our students in elementary and secondary schools about circular economy. This pilot project has been endorsed by the European Union, and Slovenia, of course, is a very green country. About 40% of our territory has been nature protected areas, so we have this awareness about green, being green, wanted to be green, but still the transition to circular economy, which I believe is a must today, it's not a choice anymore, has to be taught already in schools and everywhere else. And of course, it goes along with some other societal changes. We have to change our mindsets. We have to change our culture. We have to work on societal innovation to prepare ourselves to be able to deal with new technologies, to invent new ones, and of course to create this interdependence to our benefit. I see on one side the policies the governments and other policymakers must provide for systemic changes, of course. On the other side, and those systemic changes have to be provided at the international, national, and local levels. Then we have to create some, I would say, planetary cooperation, because the things are, as I said, interdependent. We have to have this holistic view and cooperate all around the world. And then we also have to bear in mind that also small changes in our daily lives regarding our daily decisions are very important. To change our habits, to change our attitudes regarding energy, transportation, such things, this is so important. And this is what we try to do step by step in Slovenia. Of course, having in mind Paris Agreement, Agenda 2030, sustainability goals, and the latest agreement in the EU about the green Europe, green world. And of course, Slovenia wants to be, together with other European states, a role model for the world, how to address and tackle all these issues. And of course, coherence of policies is so important. We have to provide for this coherence, and this means also to be very inclusive. For instance, in Slovenia, we have already included several times in all our projects non-governmental organization, academy, research institutions, and this has always proven to be very efficient, very beneficial to all of us, because with this inclusive process, from the beginning to the later stages, you simply keep people informed, you get everybody on board, and people get interested, they get motivated. And this is what we need, to be motivated and to be optimistic. And we are somehow, I always say we are condemned to optimism, otherwise we will not go forward together. So this might be for the beginning.
Minister, thanks so much. If I could turn to Shiv, on the business side, do you see this as a tension between technology and policy? What really helps on the private sector side to make a difference in terms of this global transformation that we need in terms of our economic base?
Thank you. I think we're a family business, 120 years old, and when I look at this situation from a little bit of a distance, I think today there's very little debate that this is the burning issue of our time. And we all need to step up to the plate to really solve it. Whether one looks at extreme weather events, whether one looks at the risks to food security, to refugee crises on the planet, etc. The challenges are really huge, and they're interconnected and they're interdependent, and we need to all address them. Sadly, I don't mean to be a critic, but I think when you look at what governments have done, really they have not done enough.
Yeah.
And they've not done it fast enough, and they have not really stepped up to the plate to solve these problems at the scale and speed that they should have done. We, of course, are not in government, so it's easy for us to look up and criticize, and that's not what I'm trying to do.
But in the private sector, can you leapfrog ahead and enable governments
So just coming to
take
that, I think,
step?
therefore, technologies are critical, and I think policies are critical. A lot of policies are being put in place. More should be put in place. I think there are lots of technologies on the planet today that could actually solve and ameliorate most of these problems. The question is, how do you do it at scale, and how do you do it together? How do you do it in a connected manner? At the moment, groups like ours look at it in a narrow way. So we as a group have gone into renewable energy with a big focus, with a target of 5 to 10 gigawatts to build in India, which would be significant.
Very.
We have gone into smart mobility, electric mobility in a very focused way, and are building one of India's leading platforms in smart mobility at the moment, electric mobility. We're working in smart cities in a big way. It's a huge business opportunity as well, but I also think the most important thing is will, political will, the will at the level of the country, at the level of the corporation and the education. I think you mentioned education, mindset, that is critical, and the will at the level of individual businesses and individuals themselves to actually be part of this movement.
Excellent. So, Badr, I'm going to jump a bit just to get the UAE perspective. At Tabreed, you're working on energy efficiency and heat, and in California, we count the efforts to become more efficient as really the first lever that enabled us to decouple economic growth from energy needs and really to enable all of our policies. And I would love to get the perspective on how you see innovation in this sector. Is it really driven by new technology? Is it driven by policy? What's the mix that's worked for you here?
So I represent a company called Tabreed based in Abu Dhabi, and it's been in business for nearly 20 years. And our take on the discussion today is policy and innovation are strongly intertwined and have to be looked upon in a combined fashion. But it's not enough. What is also, they have both to be part of a holistic strategy that involves financing, that also involved leadership that will foster then the right avenues for policies to be studied, implemented, but also push for companies, champions such as Tabreed, to take some of the discussions that we have today that have a profound impact on climate change discussion, to take those initiatives forward. So from a Tabreed perspective, we are very much an advocate for policy and regulation. We've been very much engaged in the dialogue at a national stage here. Abu Dhabi, late last year, have announced a regulation that governs and supports and promotes district cooling as a low-hanging fruit to respond to the climate change discussion, whereby we come to it through the energy efficiency angle. We've also been engaged in a policy discussion at an international stage. Last year, we were part of the United Nations Climate Change Action Summit, whereby a unique initiative that is also been formed by more than 80 different countries and institutions to promote district cooling, a global association called the Cool Coalition, and its sole mandate to promote the value add out of district cooling. And as you know, district cooling has the ability to reduce the energy consumption to provide cooling solution by nearly 50% on average, 70% at peak hours. And as such, it is a blind spot in the climate change discussion that has not been given the right attention so far. Often the discussion is about renewables and the clean source of energies, but also energy efficiency and things like sustainable cooling that Tabreed has mastered and championed, is able to achieve a very profound, immediate, and quick impact in the climate change discussion. So from a Tabreed perspective, from a national perspective, policy and regulation is a must and is important, and it has to be a top-down through leadership, but also technology and innovation has to be also in play, and we are proudly also active in this space. We have a number of innovative ideas and solutions that today we became a reference to using, for example, seawater for cooling, which will save, in contrast, the potable water that normally otherwise would be used. We have a unique plant here in Bahrain. We are using also treated sewage water as well in our operation, again, trying to optimize the water consumption in our cooling operation, but also other unique innovation aspects that we implement also in our operation. So technology and innovation is important. Regulation is also equally important. Both have to be part of a broader, holistic strategy led at a national stage. And Tabreed, actually, when I talk about leadership, Tabreed is a 20 years old company, so the vision has been since then, like the vision of Masdar, for example, which was also launched in 2000. So we need also the leadership to push innovation and technology. We also need leadership to push for policy to be looked after. So very much of a view that both are intertwined and important to advance and tackle the climate change discussion that we are involved in.
I attended the cooling summit at the COP25 meeting in Madrid, and I heard this low-hanging fruit, this ability for private sector to move ahead as long as the enabling institutions are there. So I hear a resonance with Shiv, what you're saying with this as well. So, David, I want to turn to you next because Armenia is in a unique situation. And if you could describe a little bit about how your fund works across sectors and to what extent you see the innovation on the energy side, but also in other parts of the economy as really the mandate, both for development, but also for green development.
Thank you. So as you said, our mandate is rather wide in its breadth. So we have been tasked by the new government to invest alongside global premium quality players in each sector in Armenia. And just to share a recent experience, which is to an extent representative, I think, of everything that we've heard so far on the panel. November 30th, I was in Abu Dhabi, so about 6 weeks ago, I was in Abu Dhabi and had the privilege and honor to sign a joint development agreement with Masdar for building 400 megawatts of renewable plants in Armenia. This is PV solar. I took this JDA to my government, and it took my government 3 weeks to decree by law that this is going to happen in Armenia in a certain amount of time, to allocate the land for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why is this experience, from my perspective, and I'm a newcomer to energy, by the way, why is it representative? I think there is a strong link between generally decisions that governments make and the decisions that their electorates are in favor of. Our electorate today cares. Our electorate is astute to climate change, and our electorate is important. This deal would have never had a chance to stand on its own 2 feet 2 years ago because of the autocratic government that we had couldn't care less about the population's opinions. Now, the current government in place that came through a peaceful, call it velvet revolution or change in April 2018, has ears wide open to what the electorate is asking for. Let's look at your country. California may be the exception.
The Republic of California.
If you will. I didn't say it. But generally, you would probably find that come November 2020, the topic of climate change is not going to be top 5. France is a different case. Last polling showed that over 70% of the electorate cares on the positioning of the political parties and the individuals on climate change. So I think it's very clear what Shiv was saying, that business is there to provide the solutions, but policymakers have to be willing to take it. Yeah. We are lucky today to be in a span of time where Armenia has a government which understands, recognizes, and is following up. Okay. I think it's very key to have that to have that linkage clear where the cause and effect function is.
And to have a young, opera government, to have a young population. These are not patient, I hope, because we know we have to get on with this job. So, Ram, I'm turning to you last. At the Green Climate Fund, you have this kind of unique situation, and that is we consistently hear that we don't have a lack of bankable projects, be they in energy efficiency, be they investing in circular economy, be they investing in youth and education. From the perspective of the fund, what really do you see as the most impactful things that you've invested in to try to enable both public and private sector change?
Thank you very much, Dan, for that question. And I want to begin by thanking the organizers for the invitation and, of course, for what's turning out to be the go-to event in the beginning of the year, in the world. The question that you asked is, of course, twofold. One is, what is it that the Green Climate Fund is doing to identify projects that make transformative impact in the countries? The second, of course, is the governing structure that we have that allows us or not in terms of identifying those transformative projects. And it's an important distinction to make because we have what is called, I'll give you just one concrete example. We have a private sector facility as part of the Climate Fund. We advertised in The Economist for innovative ideas. Our board agreed to put $500 million for that purpose. And we received fantastic set of proposals asking, though we said we only have $500 million, close to $15 billion. So we pared that down, and then we identified 30 projects that come to $500 million that are really terrific in terms of bringing about change in the world. But we could not speak to the innovators, the proposers of those projects. We had to go through an accredited entity. That is the system that we have in place. And as a result, though we have the money, we have the ideas, we are constrained by the process that is put in place to make sure that it's only the accredited entities that bring the projects to the fund. But leaving that aside,
but before you go on, though, I have to ask, I mean, if I go back to the minister's comment, that sounds like something that our children are not going to forgive us for, to let the bureaucracy of the process stand in the way. So this must grate and chafe at you quite a bit.
That's what I'm coming to, because the question really was about, is it a debate between technology and policy? And of course, we agree on the panel here that it is not. They both need to go hand in hand. But the fact of the matter is that we do have close to $500 billion in fossil fuel subsidies, and that's a policy question. What do you do about that? And technology, the example that I have, that I bring to you and to the world at large is what is being done in Korea. Korea had established a Green Technology Center, founded the Global Green Growth Institute, and invited the Green Climate Fund to come there. So you have the technology, the policy, and the finance, and I think all three of them are absolutely vital in terms of working together. And I think we need that model to be replicated. Though these are sort of global institutions, we need that model in each and every single country so that they work together hand in hand and then make the difference that needs to be made.
I mean, I can just say, as one example, as a Californian, the number of times myself and my colleagues get asked to travel to Morocco, where they want to do Silicon Desert, to Malaysia, where they want to do Silicon Islands. The idea is that we can marry what our policies are and how we enable both youth and private sector. And I know we don't have much time, but I would love to get any comments on sort of what you started to say. Many more ideas came to the fund than you could possibly fund in the first round. What are some of the mechanisms in the public sector, in terms of private sector, in terms of different companies that allow us to build on those ideas and to really get them funded? Is it waiting for public sector programs? Is it doing challenges like the X Prize and what you're doing? Is it business to business? What are some of the things that give people hope that there's a chance to really make this complete transition in just a few decades?
If I may, very briefly, what we are trying to do, having realized the difficulties in terms of doing what the fund is supposed to be doing, we are now working with central banks in a number of developing countries to precisely get at the policy question. How do we encourage the private sector to make the investments necessary in the sectors where the investments need to go to? And that's something, I think, what we are trying to do. And in the interest of time, I don't want to take any more.
Badr, is this something that you've seen? Energy efficiency, we keep saying, is the magic thing that makes renewables more effective, that allows us to think about energy and water. Are there things here that you kind of feel is that special sauce in that dialogue between what you do and what the government asks of you?
I'll go back to the leadership and action. At the end of the day, we can gather and discuss ideas, but if they are not followed through with action, I think those ideas will not see the light. And I mean, we are in the UAE today here, and we see many examples of incremental actions that have been now, the impact of which is global. Take Zayed future energy price, the impact 335 million people have been impacted by promoting energy and sustainability, energy efficiency, sustainability. Action is important, and action comes from leadership. And I think initiatives such as Masdar is a true example that not only you are involved in a policy discussion, but you then follow it through with a vehicle on the ground. Tabreed, 20 years ago, has been looked upon as also an important instrument for energy efficiency. Action has been taken and created the company. So I think policy and technology, they go hand in hand, as we all agree, but then they need to be followed through with concrete actions, and it is time to take action.
And Minister, let me come to you again. You mentioned the circular economy, and we have very little time, but to some people it's a very broad term, and others it's a very specific. We need to make sure that we capture all the emissions, we think in a life cycle mentality. What does that mean in terms of the programs you're doing? I know it's a brief time for this.
Well, it should be, of course, a low-carbon, green economy, circular economy. Look, there is not enough time to explain this in detail. May I say something else, which has been very important? To fight the climate change, to provide for sustainability, to save the planet, actually, and to let our next generations live, we must all become very sincere about this. Yeah. And this is why we need to raise this awareness about all those things so high, that this is not anymore business as usual. Yeah. When we talk about bureaucracy, when we talk about leadership, and so, if we just take it as business as usual, just as another day of our work in the administration, in the government, in the industry, it's not enough. It must become our common commitment, our common mission, actually to save the planet and to save the civilization. And this is the call I would like to make here. And of course, the circular economy is part of this. Yeah. Is how to, not just to, use the items again and again, and to be more careful with resources, to make this decoupling between growth and resources. But it's about our thinking, how to change our behavior and attitude. So if I may stop here.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, the idea that we can solve this problem with just accelerating a little bit the rate of installation of clean energy, of getting plastics out of these things, we're so far off target that I fear that we will be looked back on as the generation that ate off of our children's plates. And I really hope that this kind of dialogue, although short, highlights the degree from private sector to government to funds and countries to investing in these emerging technologies, really gives us a way to change that equation. So I want to thank you all for being here. I wish we had time for questions, but maybe we can ask a few people when we step off to the side. But I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you all for listening. My appreciation. Thank you.